The evening before our Series A pitch, I saw my co-founder's synced messages flash across the shared monitor, erase her admin access, crash the prototype demo. This company was always supposed to be mine. She typed it like a corporate execution she'd been drafting for a year. I didn't make a single sound. By dawn, I had dismantled her life. I was on the carpet of our Austin WeWork at 11:14 p.m. when I watched my business partner of 8 years explain, in a crisp text thread, exactly how she planned to steal my software. Not in a panicked rush. Erase her admin access, she typed to a rival developer, something that triggers a failure during the live demo. Corrupt the backup drives, if it comes to that. This company was always supposed to be mine. I set my lukewarm coffee down. I did not gasp. I slid the mouse away slowly, the way you handle a loaded weapon, when your brain quietly decides the next few hours matter more than the last 8 years. The developer replied with a laughing emoji, asking if Camille thought it would work without a fight. Camille typed the sentence I still see when a room goes too dark. Sloan hands people the matches, and thanks them for the warmth. She hasn't checked the fine print once in her life. She won't see the hostile takeover coming. And if she does, she'll just walk away, because yielding is the only thing she knows. She typed my name like a punchline. I didn't cry. I sat in that glowing office and felt my pulse steady into a terrifying calm, frightening me more than panic would have. And I thought clearly, so that is who you are. Then I opened the screen recording software and captured everything. Camille was my closest friend for 8 years. She paid my rent when my car was repossessed. She handled the insurance paperwork when my dad had his stroke. She remembered my peanut allergy, my worst breakups. I mistook that for sisterhood. It was an audit. She'd been looking for pressure points, and I never asked why. On the monitor, she kept typing. She'd spent 10 months, she told him, subtly convincing our seed investors my coding was unstable. I handed her the technical framework, she wrote, and she never noticed I held the patent rights. That is not a partnership. That is a hostile acquisition for the $14, $5 million buyout, and tomorrow I am closing it. He asked what happened if I checked the server logs before the 10:00 a.m. pitch. Camille sent a smiley face. Sloan doesn't check the logs, she said. Sloan waits for me to send the reports. That was when my hands should have shaken. Instead, they went perfectly still. She built her corporate coup on an assumption she never tested. She thought my introversion was incompetence. My silence, surrender. She spent 8 years confusing the two, and was about to learn they were entirely different ecosystems. I saved the 4K recording to an encrypted drive with every timestamp. Then I went to work. At 12:09 a.m., I called our lead backend engineer, sharing the secure drop. He didn't say, "Oh my god." He said, "Let's lock this down." The night stopped being a disaster and became a battlefield I was commanding. By 12:41 a.m., the core algorithm was gone from our shared servers, migrated to an offline vault only my biometric scan could open. At 1:02 a.m., I texted my sister, a vicious corporate litigator in Chicago. I sent the thread with one line. She replied in 90 seconds, drafting the injunction. Do not speak to her until I arrive. She brought the authentic presentation files on a physical flash drive to hand to the venture capitalists herself. Camille would still be given a laptop, because a contained threat is safer than an unpredictable one. But the hard drive inside her machine was a sterile dummy. She'd run a fake interface through the entire pitch and never know it. By 2:00 a.m., the investor breakfast was relocated 3 floors up under my sister's corporate account. A revised building access list was on file by 6:00 a.m. Camille and her developer friend were flagged. Their access to the boardroom was revoked. No screaming match, just a firm security guard waiting whenever they tried to enter spaces they no longer owned. I slept for 2 hours under my desk. At 8:52 a.m., Camille called my phone. I watched it go to voicemail. 9:04, voicemail, then 9:11, 9:12, 9:26, 9:40. 6 calls, 0 texts, because she was too strategic to leave a paper trail. She had no idea her sabotage code was locked in a server she couldn't ping, that her laptop was an empty shell, that she'd been legally stripped of her equity, or that a video of her betrayal was sitting in 3 lawyers' inboxes. She thought she was calling a naive programmer who waited to be told what to do. She was about to find out exactly what I had coded. At 9:55 a.m., my sister Cora walked into the new conference room on the 12th floor. She wore a tailored navy blazer and carried a leather portfolio that looked heavy enough to break a window. She didn't hug me. She just placed the portfolio on the mahogany table and opened it. "They're coming up the private elevator," Cora said, her voice entirely flat. "Griffin Aldrich is leading the point for the firm. He's old school, cares about stability. When he asks where your co-founder is, you give him the sterilized version. Irreconcilable differences regarding the technology roadmap. If he pushes, I step in." "He's going to push," I said, staring at the condensation dripping down a pitcher of ice water in the center of the table. "Camille spent 10 months grooming him to think I was a liability. He's going to walk in here expecting her to be the adult in the room. Then you have to be the adult," Cora replied, not looking up as she arranged her documents. "This isn't about feelings, Sloan. It's about a cap table." At exactly 10:00 a.m., the glass doors opened. Griffin Aldrich walked in. He was in his late 50s, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my first car, and he was flanked by 2 junior associates who looked like they hadn't slept since they graduated from Wharton. Griffin stopped 3 feet into the room. He looked at me, then at Cora, then at the empty chair to my right. "Morning, Sloan," he said, his tone perfectly pleasant, completely dangerous. "Where's Camille? We were supposed to go over the beta rollout numbers before we looked at the UI." I stood up. I didn't fold my hands. I kept them flat on the table, feeling the cold grain of the wood. "Camille is no longer acting in an operational capacity for this company," I said. My voice didn't waver. "We encountered a critical security vulnerability late last night. To protect the integrity of the IP, I had to isolate the core servers. Camille and I have fundamental disagreements about data security, and I've chosen to move forward independently." Griffin stared at me. The silence in the room stretched stretched out, thin and tight. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. A security vulnerability, he repeated. Sloan, Camille is the one who handles your infrastructure. She called me yesterday afternoon and told me you were struggling with the database migration. Now I walk in, she's gone, and you're telling me you isolated the servers? I built the servers, I said. It was the first time I had ever interrupted him. She handled the administrative oversight. The architecture is mine. It has always been mine. And I am prepared to demo the software for you right now, flawlessly, from an offline biometric secured drive. He didn't blink. And if I want to speak to Camille, Cora slid a single piece of paper across the table. Mr. Aldrich, this is a notice of injunction filed at 7:00 a.m. this morning in Travis County. Camille is currently suspended from all corporate activities pending a formal investigation into corporate espionage and breach of fiduciary duty. We are happy to walk you through the software, but she is legally barred from discussing the company. Griffin looked at the paper, then back at me. He nodded, just once. Let's see the demo. For 45 minutes, I drove the software. It was beautiful. Every click, every render, every data pull happened with a speed and elegance that proved exactly who the dead weight in the company had actually been. The junior associates leaned forward. Griffin took notes. By the time I closed the laptop, the tension in the room had shifted from suspicion to raw, unadulterated greed. They wanted this. They wanted it bad. We'll be in touch, Griffin said, standing up. Keep the lawyers on a leash, Sloan. I don't fund lawsuits. I fund products. Clean up your house, and we'll talk about the 14.5. They left. I sat down in the leather chair and exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that I had been holding in my chest since midnight. Cora put her hand on my shoulder. You did it, she said quietly. I need coffee, I said. We packed up and took the elevator down to the lobby. The adrenaline was receding, leaving me hollowed out and aching. I was mentally calculating the cost of changing all the corporate bank passwords when the elevator doors slid open on the ground floor. Camille was sitting on the leather sofa by the reception desk. She didn't look frantic. She didn't look like a woman who had just been locked out of her own company. She was holding a paper cup from the cafe next door, her legs crossed, wearing the beige trench coat I had bought her for her birthday 2 years ago. When she saw me, she smiled. It wasn't a desperate smile. It was the smile of someone who had just checked her opponent's king. Cora stepped in front of me immediately. Camille, you have been served electronically. If you approach my client, I will call the police. Camille didn't look at Cora. She kept her eyes entirely on me. She stood up, smoothing the front of her coat. You checked the servers, Camille said. Her voice was soft, conversational. I have to admit, Sloan, I didn't think you had it in you. Holt told me his access was revoked at 1 a.m. You moved fast. Don't speak to her, Cora snapped, reaching for her phone. It's fine, Cora, I said, stepping around my sister. I wanted to look Camille in the eye. I needed to see if there was any shame in her face at all. There wasn't. Just a cool clinical appraisal. The demo went well, I assume? Camille asked, taking a sip of her coffee. Griffin loves a good show. But I imagine you left out the part about our outstanding liabilities. I frowned. There are no liabilities. We burned through the seed round, but our burn rate is managed. We have zero debt. Camille laughed. It was a genuine bright sound. Sloan, you really are just a programmer, aren't you? You never look at the auxiliary accounts. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, holding it out to me. Cora intercepted it, snatching it from her hand. Cora unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the text rapidly. I watched my sister's face, the face of a ruthless litigator who never lost her composure, turn a shade paler. What is it? I asked. 3 months ago, Camille said smoothly, I opened a commercial line of credit with Texas Regional Bank against the company's intellectual property. As the registered financial officer, I had full authority to do so. I drew down $250,000. My stomach dropped. Where is the money? Gone, Camille said. Consulting fees. A very expensive, very legitimate vendor contract with Holt Drentz LLC. The bank holds a lien on your patent, Sloan, and there's an acceleration clause in the loan agreement. If I am terminated as an officer of the company, the loan defaults, and the full $250,000 is due immediately. If you can't pay it within 14 days, the bank seizes the IP. She took one step closer to me. The security guard at the desk was watching us, but he didn't intervene. We just looked like two women having a quiet conversation. You can keep your servers, Camille whispered, her eyes shining with quiet malice. But you fire me, and you lose the patent. The company dies before Griffin Aldrich can even write the check. So, here's how this is going to work. We're going back upstairs, you're going to restore my admin access, and we are going to close this deal together, as partners. She turned and walked out the revolving glass doors, stepping out into the bright Austin heat. I stood frozen in the lobby. I looked at my sister. Cora was staring at the loan document, her jaw tight. Is it real? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The signature is notarized, Cora said, her tone grim. It's a standard commercial lien. If she drew down the funds, the debt is real. She paid Holt, I realized, the pieces clicking together with a sickening crunch. She didn't just plot to crash the demo. She paid him $250,000 of company money to build a shadow version of the software. She was funding her own rival company using my patent as collateral. Cora folded the paper. I need to call the bank. We need to freeze everything. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email, sent directly to my personal address. The sender was Holt Drent. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email, just a single attachment. It was a screenshot of my code repository, not the front end, the deep proprietary back-end architecture. The timestamp on the screenshot was from 7 days ago. Below the image, a second line of text finally loaded on the screen. Camille is a mess, but she pays well. I have the older branch of your repo, the one before you patched the encryption flaw. Wire me $500 case by Friday, or this goes open source on GitHub. Let's talk. I stared at the screen, the lobby spinning slightly around me. I had protected the current build. I had locked Camille out of the building. I had impressed the venture capitalists. But But they hadn't just planned a coup, they had rigged the entire foundation with explosives, and I was just now noticing the wires. I handed the phone to Cora. She read the screen, her eyes tracking the single sentence Holt had sent, and I watched her jaw set into a hard, rigid line. The lobby of the WeWork was still buzzing around us. A guy in a Patagonia vest was arguing with the barista about oat milk. Someone was laughing by the elevators. The world was entirely normal, and I was bleeding out on the linoleum. He's bluffing, Cora said, but her voice lacked its usual granite certainty. He's trying to panic you into a settlement. It's an older branch, I said, staring at my own reflection in the dark glass of the security turnstiles. 3 weeks ago, I found a structural flaw in how the API keys were hashed. I spent 4 days rewriting the encryption logic. I didn't tell Camille about the flaw because she doesn't understand back-end architecture, and I didn't want her stressing over a seed-stage security patch. But Holt is a developer. He knew. And if he open sources it, it's not just our proprietary code, I explained, the nausea finally hitting my stomach. It's the flaw itself. If he puts it on GitHub, anyone can see the vulnerability. Our current system is patched, but the beta clients we deployed last month are still running the old version. We're talking about logistics networks for 3 mid-sized supply chain companies. If someone finds the repository, they can walk right into our beta client's servers. We'd be sued into oblivion before Griffin Aldrich even signs the term sheet. Cora handed the phone back to me. We need to go to the bank. Now, Texas Regional Bank was a squat, limestone building 10 minutes away on Congress Avenue. We didn't make an appointment. Cora just walked up to the commercial lending desk and dropped her business card like a subpoena. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in the glass-walled office of a vice president named Soren Keating. He looked like he belonged on a golf course, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and anxiety. He slid a heavy manila folder across his desk. I opened it. There it was. A master promissory note. $250,000. The collateral was listed clearly. All intellectual property, patents, and source code associated with the entity. And at the bottom, in sharp blue ink, was Camille's signature. Below it was mine. I stared at my own handwriting. It was a perfect match. The loop of the S, the slight drag on the A. I didn't sign this, I said. My voice sounded thin in the quiet office. Soren shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. Miss Fairfax, the document was notarized. Your co-founder presented it in person last Tuesday. As the registered financial officer, she provided the operating agreement showing she had the authority to initiate the credit line. We verified the identities and the corporate standing. The notary is fraudulent, Cora said immediately, tapping the stamp on the page. Or she slipped the signature page into a stack of routine documents my client was signing. Either way, this is fraud. You need to freeze the account. The funds have already been dispersed, Soren said, looking at his monitor, his fingers tapping awkwardly on the keyboard. A wire transfer was executed yesterday afternoon to an LLC registered to a Mr. Holt Drent. The account is empty. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and corporate detachment. The loan is active, and as per the terms, if there is a fundamental change in executive leadership, such as the termination of the signing officer, the note accelerates. You have 14 days to cure the balance, or we begin proceedings to seize the collateral. We walked out into the oppressive midday heat. The sidewalk was radiating warmth through the soles of my shoes. I felt entirely hollowed out. She used me, I said, stopping near a food truck. I wasn't crying, but my chest was so tight it was hard to pull air into my lungs. She brought me a stack of vendor contracts last week. Caterers for the launch party, WeWork lease renewals, health insurance forms for the new hires. She stood over my desk and drank a matcha latte while I signed them. She was probably laughing at me the entire time. Cora didn't offer empty comfort. That wasn't who she was. She's banking on you folding. She thinks you don't have the stomach for a war of attrition. She took the $250, gave it to Holt to live on, and now they're squeezing you for another $500,000 to bury the old code. They want the Series A money before you even get it. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Camille. Let's get lunch. We need to talk about transition terms. Bring Cora if you want, but I think you'd rather do this privately. I looked at the screen for a long time. The anger was gone. What replaced it was a cold, quiet realization of what I had to do. I had spent 8 years building the engine while Camille polished the hood, and I had let her convince everyone she was the mechanic. I'm going to meet her, I said. Cora shook her head. Absolutely not. You do not speak to opposing counsel's client without— She doesn't have counsel yet, Cora, I interrupted. She's playing poker. She thinks she has my code, my patent, and my money. I need to look at her and see exactly how far she's willing to take this. I texted back. Where? She sent an address. It was a high-end sushi place downtown. The kind of place we used to go to celebrate closing a seed round. The kind of place she knew I hated because it was loud and pretentious, where they played pulsing house music at 1 in the afternoon. I walked in 20 minutes later. Camille was sitting in a booth near the back, nursing a sparkling water. She looked perfectly at ease. When I slid into the booth across from her, she didn't flinch. I ordered the yellowtail, she said casually. You still like the yellowtail, right? Cancel the extortion, Camille, I said. I kept my voice low. Tell Holt to delete the branch. She feigned a look of gentle confusion. Extortion? Sloan, you're the one who locked me out of my own company. Holt is an independent contractor. If he feels his proprietary contributions aren't being compensated, that's between you and him. He sent me an email demanding $500,000. And you just secured a verbal commitment for 14.5, Camille smiled. Consider it a severance package. Pay the man, pay off the bank loan, and you can have your little company all to yourself. Or don't. And he puts the code on GitHub, the beta clients get breached, the bank takes the patent, and Griffin Aldrich walks away. It's just a math problem, Sloan. You've always been good at math. She reached across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled it back. You forged my signature on a commercial loan, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I slipped a page into a stack of lease agreements. She corrected smoothly. You signed it yourself. You just didn't read it. Like I told Holt. You handed hand people the matches and thank them for the warmth. She leaned back, looking incredibly satisfied. I spent 8 years translating your social awkwardness into something investors could stomach. I built the brand. I built the network. You just wrote the code. And now, you think you can just erase me? I'm not going anywhere, Sloan. I want the $250 I already took. I want the $500 for Holt, and I want a 2% advisory royalty on the Series A. Put it in writing by tomorrow, and I'll tell Holt to delete the repo. The waiter arrived, setting down a platter of expensive, thinly sliced fish. Neither of us looked at it. And if I say no, I asked, then I burn the house down, Camille said softly, and we both walk away with nothing. I stood up from the booth. I didn't touch the food. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the restaurant, the heavy glass door sealing out the thumping bass of the dining room. When I got back to the WeWork, Cora was pacing in my glass-walled office, on the phone with a forensic accountant. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank-eyed screen for a long time. Camille was right about one thing. It was a math problem. She had the leverage. She had the time constraint. But she had fundamentally misunderstood the architecture of the trap she set. I opened the server administration panel. I didn't look at the current active branch. I pulled up the archive logs from the exact day Holt had cloned the repository, 7 days ago, at 2:14 a.m. I started combing through the access footprints. Holt was a decent developer, but he was lazy. He hated doing manual environment setups. When he cloned the repo to his local machine, he wouldn't have just taken the code. He would have taken the testing database too, so he could run it locally without having to mock up fake user data. I clicked into the SQL dump logs. My heart gave a hard, painful thud against my ribs. He had downloaded the testing database, but he hadn't downloaded the sanitized version. He had bypassed the security protocol and downloaded the raw beta client logs to make his local testing faster. I picked up my phone and called Cora. She held up a finger, finishing her sentence with the accountant, then hung up. Did she confess to the forgery? Cora asked. No, I said, turning the laptop around so Cora could see the screen. But she just gave us something better. Holt didn't just steal my code. He stole the live data from our beta clients. Names, addresses, logistics routes, internal communications. Cora frowned, leaning in to look at the screen. Okay, that's a data breach. It's bad for us, Sloan. It's a federal crime for him, I said. He crossed state lines with proprietary, unencrypted corporate data belonging to third-party entities. And he just sent me an email attempting to extort me with the materials he stole. I pulled up a new terminal window. Camille thinks I'm going to negotiate. She thinks I'm going to try and find the money to pay him off, but she forgot that I built the tracking modules into those beta logs. I started typing, my fingers flying across the keys with a rhythm I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't just a programmer waiting to be told what to do. I was the architect of the system they were trying to use against me. What are you doing? Cora asked, watching the lines of code cascade down the black screen. I'm waking up the tracking beacons in the data he stole, I said. Holt has to open the database to run the code. When he does, it's going to ping our servers with his exact IP address and machine identifier. I'm going to geolocate the stolen data, and then we're going to have a very different conversation about who is burning whose house down. I hit the return key. The terminal blinked once, twice, and then a cascade of raw connection data started scrolling down the screen. I watched the timestamps populate in real time. Holt had the database open right now. He was querying the logistics tables, probably trying to isolate a clean dataset to show Camille he actually had something worth $500,000. A new line of text snapped into place at the bottom of the terminal. Edge connection established. IP logged. I highlighted the IP address and ran it through a basic geolocation script. It took less than 5 seconds. He's not at his apartment, I said, leaning closer to the screen. He's at a WeWork. But not this one. The one on Domain Boulevard. He's sitting in a public workspace on an unencrypted guest network holding gigabytes of stolen, proprietary corporate data. Cora took a photo of my screen with her phone. That's all I need. I'm drafting a notice of federal data theft. I'll send it directly to his personal email, his LLC's registered agent, and I'll copy Camille. I'll give them 1 hour to destroy the local copies and provide sworn affidavits before I forward the logs to the FBI field office. Wait, I said, putting my hand over her screen. Don't copy Camille. Cora looked at me, her lawyer instincts instantly bristling at being managed. Sloan, if we don't apply the pressure to both of them simultaneously, Camille is managing Holt, I said. She's keeping him calm, promising him a massive payout from the Series A. She convinced him to steal the data. But Holt is a mercenary. He only cares about getting paid. If you send him a federal threat and leave Camille off the thread, he's going to panic and call her. He's going to realize she exposed him to federal prison time for a payout that doesn't exist yet. Cora studied my face. A slow, tight smile appeared on her lips. Divide the camp. Exactly. Let him realize she's using him too. Cora went to the empty desk across from mine, cracked open her laptop, and started typing furiously. I sat back in my chair, staring at the terminal. I had the leverage now. It was a solid, undeniable threat. But the heavy, sinking feeling in my stomach hadn't gone away. The $250,000 bank loan was still sitting on my chest. Even if Holt deleted the code and vanished, Camille still held the trigger to detonate the company's finances. My phone buzzed on the desk. I expected it to be Camille, following up on her lunch threat. The caller ID said Griffin Aldrich. I stared at it. Venture capitalists don't call founders directly 3 hours after a pitch, not unless they are passing on the deal or there's a catastrophic problem. I picked it up on the 4th ring. Griffin. Hi, Sloan, Griffin said. His voice was smooth, completely devoid of the sharp edge it had carried in the boardroom that morning. I have a standing reservation at the Capitol Grill at 4 o'clock. I'd like you to meet me. Just you. I'm currently dealing with the security infrastructure, I said carefully. My legal counsel. I don't want to talk to your sister, Griffin interrupted, the pleasantness dropping from his tone like a heavy curtain. I want to talk to you. Camille called me 20 minutes ago. She was very forthcoming about the commercial lien at Texas Regional Bank. 4 o'clock, Sloan. Don't be late. He hung up. I set the phone down. The room suddenly felt very cold. Cora, I said quietly. She looked up from her screen. What? Camille told Griffin about the loan. She beat us to it. Cora stopped typing. She closed her eyes for a brief second, calculating the damage. She's trying to poison the well. If Griffin thinks the IP is compromised by debt, he pulls his term sheet. If he pulls the term sheet, Camille figures you'll be so desperate you'll agree to whatever terms she wants just to keep the lights on. I have to go meet him, I said, standing up and grabbing my blazer from the back of the chair. I'm coming with you, Cora said, already reaching for her bag. No, he explicitly said no lawyers. If I bring you, I look like I'm hiding behind you. Camille sold him on the idea that I'm just a fragile coder who needs adult supervision. If I want his money, I have to walk into that steakhouse alone and prove her wrong. Cora hated it, but she knew I was right. She sat back down. I'll have the federal notice ready for Holt by the time you get back. Do not agree to anything with Griffin. Just listen. Find out where his head is at. The Capitol Grill was dark, smelling of expensive roasted meat, old leather, and bourbon. It was the kind of place where multi-million-dollar deals were finalized over $80 steaks. The hostess led me to a high-backed booth in the far corner. Griffin was already there, a glass of amber liquid sitting on the white tablecloth in front of him. He didn't stand when I arrived. He just gestured to the empty seat across from him. Drink? He asked. Just water, thank you. He nodded to a waiter hovering nearby, who vanished instantly. Griffin folded his hands on the table. He looked entirely relaxed, which made my heart beat faster. You have a very impressive product, Sloan, Griffin started. I meant what I said this morning. The architecture is elegant. The data flows are seamless. It's exactly the kind of disruptive tech my fund is looking to acquire. Thank you. Which is why it's such a shame that you don't actually own it, he continued, taking a slow sip of his drink. I own 80% of the equity, I countered, keeping my voice steady. And I hold the patent personally. You hold a patent that has a $250,000 anvil hanging over it, Griffin corrected gently. Camille sent me the loan documents. She also informed me that you terminated her this morning, which accelerates the debt. The bank is going to call that loan in 13 days. Do you have $250,000 in liquid capital to cure it? We are exploring options to restructure the debt, I said, sounding much more confident than I felt. Griffin smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. No, you aren't. You're panicking. You're sitting there wondering how someone you trusted for 8 years managed to outmaneuver you so completely. Camille is ruthless, Sloan. I respect ruthless. I don't respect founders who let their own company get stolen out from under them. I didn't blink. She didn't steal it. I caught her. You caught her too late, Griffin said. He leaned forward, the ice in his glass clinking softly. Here is the reality of your situation. I am not going to give you $14.5 million so you can spend the next 2 years fighting your former best friend in Chancery Court. I don't fund messy divorces, so you're passing. I reached for my purse, ready to stand up. I didn't say that. I stopped. I looked back at him. I don't want the current corporate entity, Griffin said, his voice dropping lower. It's tainted. It's full of liabilities and toxic equity. But I want your code. So, here is what is going to happen. My fund is going to purchase the commercial note from Texas Regional Bank. I froze. You're buying my debt. I already made the call to Soren Keating. The paperwork is being drafted, Griffin said smoothly. By tomorrow morning, my firm will hold the lien on your patent. And since Camille is no longer an officer, the loan is in default. I am going to foreclose on the IP. The restaurant noise faded into a dull, rushing roar in my ears. He wasn't passing on the deal. He was circumventing it entirely. You can't do that, I said, my voice tight. It's perfectly legal, Griffin replied. I take the IP. I fold it into a new shell company that I own 100% of. But a software company is nothing without its architect. So, I will hire you, Sloan. You will be the chief technology officer of this new entity. I'll pay you a very generous salary, $300,000 a year. You'll get comprehensive benefits, a corner office, and a dedicated engineering team. He paused, letting the numbers hang in the air between us. But you won't have equity, he finished. You won't be a founder. You will be an employee. And Camille gets absolutely nothing. She gets wiped out in the foreclosure. I stared at him. He was offering to solve my Camille problem by taking everything for himself. He saw a bleeding founder and he brought a bucket instead of bandages. You're stealing my life's work, I whispered. I'm salvaging it, Griffin corrected. If I walk away, the bank takes the IP, they auction it off for pennies to a competitor, and you end up bankrupt. I'm offering you a lifeline, a very comfortable one. He slid a heavy cream-colored business card across the table. You have until 9:00 a.m. tomorrow to agree to the employment contract, Griffin said, finally standing up. If you fight me on the foreclosure, I will tie you up in litigation until your legal bills force you into personal bankruptcy. Think about it, Sloan. $300,000 a year is a lot of matches. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving his drink half finished. I sat alone in the booth for a long time. The waiter came by and placed a glass of ice water in front of me, but I didn't touch it. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was a new message on the screen, but it wasn't from Cora, and it wasn't from Camille. It was an unregistered number. Sloan, it's Holt. She locked me out of the LLC accounts. The $250K is gone. She moved it. I didn't sign up for federal wire fraud. We need to talk. I didn't reply to Holt's text. I stared at the green message bubble until my phone screen dimmed to black. The heat inside the steakhouse had felt heavy, but stepping back out onto 7th Street was like walking directly into an oven. The humid Texas air hit my face, thick with exhaust fumes and burnt diesel from a idling city bus. It was 4:18 p.m. In less than 17 hours, Griffin Aldrich would purchase a piece of paper from Texas Regional Bank and execute a legal execution on everything I had bled for over the last 6 years. My phone vibrated in my palm. A text from Cora. Injunction papers are printed. Holt's process server is waiting outside his WeWork. Where are you? I stood on the cracked concrete sidewalk, watching two tourists in matching straw hats take photos of a mural across the street. A normal afternoon for everyone else. People were buying coffee, meeting clients, planning dinner, completely unaware that a $250,000 wire fraud and a corporate hostile takeover were folding over each other 3 blocks away. I typed back to Cora, "Meet me at the office. Don't serve Holt yet." I caught a rideshare back to the WeWork. The driver had the radio tuned to a sports talk station. 2 men shouting over each other about a contract extension for a backup quarterback. I leaned my head against the cold window glass and closed my eyes, but all I saw was the blue ink of my own forged signature on that master promissory note. Camille hadn't just stolen money. She had dismantled my ability to trust my own memory. How many other times had she stood next to my desk with a warm coffee, setting a document down, pointing at a signature line with her manicured fingernail, while I kept my eyes glued to a terminal script? How many times had I said thanks, Cam, without even reading the header? When the car pulled up to the curb on Colorado Street, I walked straight past the front desk, ignoring the receptionist's wave, and took the stairs up to the 4th floor. Cora was standing by the glass door of our private office, holding a thick, stapled document in a yellow folder. Her jacket was off, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her dark hair pulled back into a tight, messy knot. She looked like she was preparing for a fistfight. Why shouldn't I serve him? She demanded the second I stepped inside and shut the door behind us. He has the stolen beta logs, Sloan. The second that process server hands him those papers, he's legally on notice. He can't delete a single file without committing spoliation of evidence. He doesn't have the $250,000, I said, sitting down at the small laminate conference desk. The surface was littered with cold coffee cups and crumpled receipts. Camille took it back. Cora paused, her hand hovering over her leather briefcase. What do you mean she took it back? Holt texted me while I was at the restaurant, I said, pulling up the message on my phone and sliding it across the table to her. She routed the money through his LLC, but she had full authorization on his business account. Or she used a joint power of attorney. Whatever she did, the $250,000 isn't in his bank account anymore. She moved it again. Cora picked up my phone, her eyes scanning the 3 lines from Holt. She let out a short, sharp breath that sounded almost like a laugh. She used him as a pass-through entity. She wanted his name on the wire trail, so if the bank investigated, it looked like a third-party software vendor fee. Now he's holding the bag for a fraudulent wire, and she has the cash sitting in a shell company or an offshore account. He's panicking, I said. He knows he's exposed. Good, Cora said coldly. Panicked people make mistakes. We serve him now, push him to turn state's evidence against her, and Griffin Aldrich buys our debt at 9:00 a.m. Tomorrow, I interrupted. Cora stopped. The room fell dead silent. What did Griffin say at the restaurant? She asked, her voice dropping into that quiet, dangerous register she used when a case was turning ugly. I told her every word. The $300,000 salary offer, the CTO title, the foreclosure on the patent, the complete wiping out of our equity. I didn't soften it. I didn't try to make it sound less like a mugging. When I finished, Cora sat down slowly in the swivel chair opposite me. Her hands lay flat on the yellow folder. For the first time since midnight yesterday, she looked tired. He's playing hardball, she muttered, staring at the white wall behind my head. It's a classic loan-to-own play. VCs do it when a startup is drowning. They don't buy the equity. They buy the debt, foreclose, clean the cap table, and hire the founder back as an employee for peanuts. It's not peanuts, I said quietly. $300,000 a year is more money than I've ever made in my life. Cora snapped her head up, her eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp anger that caught me off guard. Don't you dare, Sloan. Don't you dare sit in that chair and rationalize this. You built this company from a spare bedroom in East Austin while you were living on ramen and driving a sedan with a slipping transmission. That algorithm is worth $30 million on the open market. And Griffin knows it. He's trying to buy a Ferrari for the price of a used bicycle because he knows you're scared. I am scared, I said. My voice cracked slightly on the second word, the sound raw and humiliating in the small room. I have $1,100 in my personal checking account, Cora. My rent is due in 4 days. If Griffin forecloses, I have nothing. I don't have the money to pay you, I don't have the money to pay Texas Regional Bank, and I don't have the money to fight Camille in court for the next 3 years. Cora didn't answer right away. She reached into her bag, pulled out a pack of gum, folded a stick into her mouth, and chewed slowly. You don't have to pay me, she said after a long moment. I'm your sister. You have a practice in Chicago, I said. You're burning billable hours sitting in a WeWork in Austin because I was stupid enough to let my best friend sign my name on a bank loan. You weren't stupid, Cora said, her tone softening just a fraction. You were building a product. She was building a trap. There's a difference. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. If Griffin buys the note tomorrow morning, he becomes our creditor. But he can't foreclose instantaneously. There's a mandatory 30-day cure period under Texas Finance Code for commercial liens, even with an acceleration clause. 30 days isn't enough time to raise a Series A with a lawsuit hanging over us, I replied. No investor will touch us with a dirty cap table and a contested patent. We don't need a new investor, Cora said. We need Camille to put that $250,000 back into the bank. My phone chimed on the table. A notification from our corporate banking app. I picked it up. A new charge had just hit our main operating account, the one Camille still had read-only access to before I revoked her administrative privileges. It was an automated debit reversal. $12,450. I stared at the screen, my heart dropping into my boots. What is it? Cora asked. Our health insurance provider, I said, my hands starting to tremble slightly as I clicked into the account transaction log. The annual premium for our 5 employees was auto-debited this morning, but Camille initiated a chargeback 3 hours ago, claiming unauthorized transaction. The bank just honored the reversal. Why would she do that? Cora frowned. That just leaves the company uninsured. No, I said, my voice dropping as the cold reality hit me. It triggers Here's a breach of contract with our 4 senior engineers. Their employment agreements have a mandatory benefit continuation clause. If their health coverage lapses for more than 24 hours without notice, their IP assignment agreements are voided. I looked up at Cora. My hands were completely still now, locked in that cold, mechanical focus that had carried me through the night before. She's not just trying to steal the patent, I said. She's trying to release the engineers from their non-competes so she can hire them at her new company tomorrow morning. Cora stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She's dismantling the operational core from the outside. I stood up, pulling my laptop out of my bag and flipping it open. I have to fix the insurance payment before 5 o'clock. If the system logs the lapse overnight, the engineers get an automated alert from the HR portal at 8 a.m. Tomorrow, how much is in the operating account? Cora asked, standing up beside me. I logged into the dashboard, staring at the bottom line on the screen. Available balance, $4,120. The seed money was gone. The health insurance reversal had drawn the account down, and with the bank loan frozen and the Series A on hold, we didn't have enough money to cover the $12,000 premium. I sat back down in the chair, staring at the red warning light on the HR portal. We had less than 45 minutes before the bank clearinghouse closed for the day. If I couldn't find $8,000 in 37 minutes, my 4 best developers, the men and women who had built the user interface, the API connectors, and the database architecture, would wake up tomorrow morning with zero contractual obligation to stay, and Camille would be waiting for them with $250,000 in stolen cash to pay their signing bonuses. I looked at Cora. I need $8,000. Cora pulled out her personal phone, tapped the screen twice, and looked at her account balance. She shook her head slowly. I just paid my quarterly tax estimates on Monday. Sloan. I have $3,000 in liquid cash until my firm's draw clears on Friday. I looked down at my phone. Holt's text message was still sitting on the screen. I didn't sign up for federal wire fraud. We need to talk. I tapped his number and hit call. It rang once, twice, then a rough, breathless voice answered on the 3rd ring. Sloan? Holt, I said, keeping my voice dead even, devoid of anger, devoid of panic. I don't care about the repo on GitHub. I don't care about the old code. But if you want to stay out of a federal penitentiary, you are going to wire $8,500 into my corporate checking account in the next 20 minutes. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the background hum of an air conditioner and the faint clatter of silverware in a cafeteria. I don't have it, Holt stammered, his voice tight with panic. I'm telling you, she drained the LLC account. She had a secondary sign-off on the corporate card. You have a personal savings account, Holt. I cut him off, my tone dropping into something icy and absolute. You bought a brand new Audi 3 months ago. You have the money. Wire $8,500 to my business routing number by 4:50 p.m. Or, my sister files the federal criminal complaint with the Western District of Texas before the clerk's office closes at 5. Sloan, please. 20 minutes, Holt, I said, and hung up the phone. I set the mobile device down on the desk between us. The second hand on the wall clock behind Cora ticked loudly in the quiet office. 4:32 p.m. Cora watched me, her brows drawn together in a look that was half disbelief, half respect. You're extortion matching him. It's not extortion, I said, staring at the bank transfer screen on my laptop, my fingers hovering over the refresh key. It's an advance on the damages he owes this company for stealing our client logs. We sat in total silence for 12 long minutes. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. The sun outside the high-rise window began to dip lower, casting long orange shadows across the gray carpet. At 4:46 p.m., my laptop chimed. An incoming wire notification popped up in the top right corner of my screen. Incoming wire transfer. $8,500 from H. Drent. Drick status. Cleared. Dodge. I didn't waste 2 seconds celebrating. I immediately clicked into the HR benefits portal, reauthorized the $12,000 health insurance premium, typed in our updated checking account details, and hit submit payment. The screen loaded for 3 agonizing seconds before a green checkmark appeared. 1 payment processed. Policy active. I closed the laptop lid with a soft click. I leaned back in the chair and let my hands fall into my lap. My palm was slick with cold sweat. Okay, Cora said, taking a deep breath. The core team is locked in. The insurance is clear. That gives us breathing room until tomorrow morning. No, it doesn't, I said, looking up at her. Griffin still buys the loan at 9 a.m. Cora took the stapled yellow folder from the table and opened it. She pulled out a single sheet of paper with a blue official seal at the top. Not if we file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection at 8:30 a.m., she said. I stared at her, feeling a fresh wave of cold shock run through my chest. Bankruptcy? Cora, if we go into Chapter 11, the company is branded as damaged goods. Griffin will walk away forever. Griffin wants to buy the note to foreclose on the patent, Cora explained, her voice sharp and precise. The absolute second a corporate entity files a petition for Chapter 11 in federal bankruptcy court, an automatic stay goes into effect under Section 362 of the Bankruptcy Code. It instantly freezes all collection efforts, all foreclosures, all lien enforcement, and all corporate asset seizures. She tapped the blue seal on the paper. If we file at 8:30 a.m., Griffin buys a defaulted note that he legally cannot foreclose on. He can't touch the patent. He can't hire you away. He can't do anything without a bankruptcy judge's explicit permission. It completely neutralizes his deadline. And what happens to Camille? I asked. Camille becomes an equity holder in a debtor-in-possession company under federal court oversight, Cora said, a dark satisfaction settling into her eyes. Every single transaction she made, the $250,000 loan, the wire to Holt, the chargeback on the health insurance, becomes subject to forensic audit by a court-appointed trustee. If she moved that $250,000 into a personal account, the federal trustee will seize her personal assets to recover it for the estate. I looked at the yellow folder. It was a nuclear option. It meant meant public filings, news articles on tech blogs, and a permanent scar on my reputation as a founder. But it was the only move left on the board that didn't end with me handing Griffin Aldrich the keys to my life's work for a salary. Do it, I said. Cora nodded, pulling a pen from her pocket and laying the signature page in front of me. Sign here. I'll file it with the clerk's office first thing in the morning. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name carefully across the line, feeling the weight of the ink sinking into the paper. It was 5:15 p.m. Cora packed up her briefcase, snapped it shut, and looked at me. Go back to your apartment, Sloan. Take a shower, eat something, and sleep. I'll handle the filing from my laptop at the hotel. I'm going to stay for a little while, I said. I need to clean up some server logs. Don't stay too late, she said, giving my shoulder a firm squeeze before walking out the glass door. I sat alone in the dark office as the sun finally sank below the Austin skyline, turning the room a deep twilight purple. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The blue glow from my laptop screen reflected off the dark windows. I opened my private terminal window. I pulled up the encrypted offline vault where the core algorithm was stored, the one only my biometric scan could open. I looked at the source code. Millions of lines of logical operations, data models, and optimization loops that I had written over 6 years of my life. Every line represented a night I hadn't slept, a weekend I had missed, a relationship that had withered because I was too busy staring at this screen. A notification popped up in the corner of my monitor, an incoming email to my personal address. I opened it. It was from an address I didn't recognize, but the signature at the bottom made my stomach turn over. Dear Miss Fairfax, my name is Whitmore Cahill. I am senior partner at Cahill & Associates, representing Miss Camille Novak. My client has instructed me to inform you that she has filed an emergency ex parte petition in the 201st District Court of Travis County, seeking a temporary restraining order and the appointment of a temporary receiver over the company's technical assets, citing breach of fiduciary duty and illegal lockout by a majority shareholder. A hearing has been set before Judge Adele Sorrell tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m. Please find the attached notice of hearing and supporting affidavits. I stared at the timestamp on the email. It had been sent at 5:01 p.m., 1 minute after the courthouse officially closed for public filings. I clicked the attachment. The supporting affidavit was signed by Camille, but attached to the back of the petition was a second affidavit, signed by someone else. I scrolled down to the bottom of the PDF to see the signature line. It was signed by our lead back-end engineer, the same engineer I had called at 12:09 a.m. last night to help me lock down the servers. The affidavit stated that I had forced him, under threat of termination, to illegally migrate company IP to an unauthorized personal drive, and that he believed I was suffering from acute mental breakdown that rendered me unfit to manage the company. I sat in the pitch-black office, the cold air from the vent blowing down on the back of my neck, staring at my lead engineer's signature on Camille's court filing. The door to the WeWork suite creaked open softly in the hallway outside. Footsteps echoed on the linoleum, slow and deliberate, stopping right outside my glass door. I looked up. Camille was standing in the dark hallway, holding a white paper envelope in her hand. She looked through the glass at me, set the envelope down on the floor by the doorframe, turned around, and walked away into the shadows of the empty building. I watched the empty hallway for a full minute before I stood up from my desk. The motion sensor lights in the corridor had already clicked off, leaving the space outside my office entirely dark. I walked to the glass door, pulled the handle, and picked up the white envelope from the carpet. It was heavy, printed on thick legal stock. I didn't open it immediately. I carried it back to my desk, set it next to my keyboard, and stared at it. Camille didn't have to deliver it herself. She had a lawyer now. A process server could have done it in the morning, but she wanted to be the one to slide the knife in. She wanted me to know that she could still walk up to my door whenever she pleased. I tore the flap open. It was the physical copy of the petition for the temporary restraining order. Attached to the back was Declan's affidavit. I flattened the pages on my desk and read every word my lead engineer had sworn under penalty of perjury. He wrote that I had locked the team out of the primary code base without warning. That part was true. He wrote that my behavior over the last 48 hours had been erratic, hostile, and indicative of severe psychological distress. That was a lie. And then came the final paragraph, the one Camille had undoubtedly drafted for him. Sloan Fairfax is actively destroying the company's technical infrastructure, posing an immediate and catastrophic risk to the equity holders. I believe she is no longer mentally capable of fulfilling her duties as chief executive officer. It hurt. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Declan was the first person I had hired. I had spent countless nights sitting next to him, debugging AP endpoints, eating cold pizza, talking about his plans to buy a house in Cedar Park for his pregnant wife. I looked back at my monitor. My terminal window was still open. I didn't cry. I just placed my hands on the keyboard. If Declan was lying, he had a reason. People don't torch their own careers for fun. I pulled up the internal access logs for the HR portal, the same portal Camille had used to cancel the health insurance earlier that afternoon. I ran a query for Declan's employee ID, filtering for the last 24 hours. At 2:15 p.m., Camille had restricted his access to the equity dashboard. At 2:40 p.m., she had initiated the cancellation of his health insurance. At 3:15 p.m., there was an outgoing email from Camille's account to Declan's personal Gmail. I couldn't read the content of the email, but I didn't need to. The timeline told the whole story. She had frozen his vested shares and canceled the health insurance his pregnant wife depended on. And then she had offered him a choice: sign the affidavit declaring me insane, or lose everything. He chose his family over his boss. I couldn't even bring myself to hate him for it. But I wasn't going to let her use him to take my company. I didn't sleep. I stayed in the office, pulling every log, every timestamp, every digital fingerprint Camille and Holt had left across the servers. I compiled it all into a single, encrypted file directory. By the time the sun started coming up, turning the Austin sky a pale, bruised purple, I had a complete forensic map of a corporate hijacking. At 6:30 a.m., I walked down to the WeWork showers, washed my face, and changed into the spare black suit I kept in my locker for emergency investor meetings. At 7:15 a.m., I met Cora in the lobby of the Travis County Courthouse. She was holding a thick leather briefcase and a thermos of black coffee. She took one look at my face and handed me the thermos without a word. I drank it. It tasted like ash and adrenaline. "The bankruptcy petition is filed," Cora said, checking her watch. The federal clerk stamped it at 7:02 a.m. "We are officially a Chapter 11 debtor in possession. Griffin Aldrich's loan purchase is frozen, and Camille's debt is locked inside the federal estate." "What about the hearing?" I asked, looking toward the security metal detectors where a line of lawyers and defendants was already forming. "We go up to the 201st District Court," Cora said, a tight, merciless smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. "We let Whitmore Cahill make his entire argument. We let Camille play the victim. And then I drop a federal anvil on their heads." The courtroom was on the 5th floor. It didn't look like the courtrooms in movies. It had low ceilings, humming fluorescent lights, and smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper. The wooden pews were scuffed. When we pushed through the swinging wooden doors, Camille was already there. She was sitting at the plaintiff's table. She wasn't wearing her expensive trench coat or her usual designer heels. She wore a soft, pale blue cardigan, her hair pulled back in a simple, messy clip. She looked exhausted, concerned, and entirely sympathetic. She looked like a woman trying to save her best friend from a mental breakdown. Next to her was Whitmore Cahill, a man who looked exactly like his email signature implied: expensive, silver-haired, and brutally efficient. And sitting in the back row of the gallery, wearing a charcoal suit and checking his phone, was Griffin Aldrich. He had come to watch the execution. If Camille got the receivership, she would approve the foreclosure of his loan, and he would take the patent. They had cut a side deal. I could see it in the casual way Griffin nodded to Whitmore Cahill. Cora and I sat down at the defense table. Camille didn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the judge's empty bench, playing her part perfectly. At exactly 8:00 a.m., Judge Adele Sorrell took the bench. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, tired eyes. She opened the file folder in front of her, skimmed the top page, and sighed. "All right, I have an ex parte petition for a temporary restraining order and appointment of a receiver in the matter of Fairfax versus Novak. Mr. Cahill, you're representing the petitioner. Keep it brief. Why am I freezing a tech company on a Thursday morning?" Whitmore Cahill stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, we are here to prevent the imminent destruction of a multi-million-dollar corporate asset. My client, Miss Novak, is the co-founder of this company. Over the last 48 hours, the majority shareholder, Miss Fairfax, has exhibited severe, erratic behavior. She has illegally locked my client out of the premises, severed access to the corporate banking accounts, and moved proprietary code onto offline, untraceable hardware." He paused, letting the weight of the accusations settle in the quiet room. "We have provided a sworn affidavit from the company's lead engineer, confirming that Miss Fairfax is acting paranoid, issuing threats, and actively destabilizing the software infrastructure. If she is not immediately restrained and a receiver appointed, the company will default on a $250,000 commercial loan by the end of business today, resulting in the total loss of the entity's intellectual property." Judge Sorrell looked over her glasses at our table. "Counsel, are you representing Miss Fairfax?" Cora stood up. She didn't button her jacket. She just leaned forward, resting her hands on the edge of the table. "I am, Your Honor, Cora Fairfax, for the respondent, and I can save this court a tremendous amount of time. We concede." The courtroom went dead silent. I saw Camille's head snap toward us, her carefully crafted mask of concern slipping for a fraction of a second. Griffin Aldrich looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing. Judge Sorrell frowned. "You concede to the TRO and the receivership?" "No, Your Honor," Cora said, her voice ringing clear and hard off the wood-paneled walls. "We concede that the company is in financial distress, which is why, at 7:02 a.m. this morning, the entity filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Western District of Texas. Here is the stamped notice of filing with the federal case number." Cora walked up to the bailiff and handed him a single sheet of paper. He passed it up to the judge. Whitmore Cahill's face turned the color of old chalk. "Your Honor, I have received no notice of this, because it was filed 58 minutes ago, counsel," Cora interrupted smoothly. "As this court is well aware, the moment a Chapter 11 petition is filed, an automatic stay goes into effect under 11 U.S. Code Section 362. This state court no longer has jurisdiction over the debtor's assets, its operations, or its governance. Your Honor cannot appoint a receiver, because the federal bankruptcy court now oversees this estate." Judge Sorrell looked at the paper, then looked at Whitmore Cahill. "She's right, counsel. The federal stay is absolute. Your petition for a TRO is moot. The bankruptcy trustee has jurisdiction now. Your Honor, this is a bad faith filing." Cahill stammered, scrambling to recover. "Miss Fairfax is attempting to use federal bankruptcy to avoid state court accountability for her erratic actions." "I am using federal bankruptcy," Cora said, her voice suddenly dropping into a tone of pure, unadulterated menace, "to trigger a mandatory forensic audit of the company's finances by a federal trustee. Because yesterday afternoon, Miss Novak committed wire fraud." Camille flinched. It was a tiny movement, just a sharp intake of breath, but I saw it. Cora turned slightly, addressing the judge but making sure every word carried to the back of the room. "The $250,000 loan Mr. Cahill referenced was taken out fraudulently by Miss Novak. She forged my client's signature on the commercial note, wired the entire sum to a third-party contractor, and then drained that contractor's account into an offshore LLC. We filed Chapter 11 because it is the only way to compel Miss Novak to return the stolen funds under penalty of federal bankruptcy fraud." Judge Sorrell took her glasses off. She She looked at Camille, then at Cahill. Is this true, counsel? These are baseless, defamatory allegations, Cahill said loudly, but he was stepping slightly away from Camille as he said it, the instinct of a self-preserving lawyer realizing his client had lied to him. The federal trustee will determine if they are baseless, Cora said. We have the server logs, the HR portal manipulation records, and the IP tracking data from the stolen code. The FBI field office in Austin was copied on the bankruptcy filing. Judge Sorrell picked up her gavel. This court is preempted by the federal filing. The petition for a TRO is dismissed without prejudice. Mr. Cahill, I strongly suggest you advise your client on the penalties for perjury in a federal bankruptcy proceeding. We are adjourned. The gavel cracked. It sounded like a gunshot. I didn't wait for Camille. I turned around and walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. Griffin Aldrich was already standing up, slipping his phone into his pocket. He looked furious. He had come to buy a distressed asset on the cheap, and I had just locked it inside a federal vault where he couldn't touch it. You burned your own house down, Sloan, Griffin said as I walked past him. Nobody funds a company in Chapter 11. You're dead in the water. I own my code, Griffin, I said, not breaking my stride. And the debt is frozen. You can take your term sheet somewhere else. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors and out into the hallway. The air conditioning felt like ice against the back of my neck. My hands were shaking, just a little, the adrenaline finally starting to crack through the cold composure I had held for 2 days. The courtroom doors opened behind me. Camille walked out. Whitmore Cahill wasn't with her. He was still inside, frantically packing his briefcase. Camille stood in the hallway, looking at me. The soft, concerned friend act was completely gone. Her face was pale, tight with a terror she was trying desperately to hide. You think you won, she said, her voice a fragile, brittle hiss. You're bankrupt. You have no investors. You have no money to pay the engineers. The health insurance is paid, I said quietly. I know you tried to cancel it to break their non-competes. I reauthorized it at 4:46 p.m. yesterday, and Holt wired me $8,000 to do it. Camille stopped. Her eyes widened, the reality of what Holt had done finally connecting. He rolled on you, Cam, I said. The nickname felt foreign in my mouth now. He realized you left his name on the wire transfer for the loan. He gave me the money to cover the premiums, and he gave me the tracking logs. The federal trustee is going to audit your accounts by the end of the week. They're going to find the $250,000. If you spent it, they will liquidate everything you own to pay it back. Your car, your apartment, everything. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. For 8 years, she had relied on the assumption that I would back down to avoid conflict. She had built her entire exit strategy on my silence. You always told people I yielded, I said, my voice barely above a whisper in the echoing marble hallway. You should have checked the logs. I turned my back on her and walked toward the elevators. Cora fell into step beside me, her briefcase swinging heavily in her hand. We rode the elevator down in silence. We walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding, brutal Austin morning sun. The city was awake now. Traffic was snarled on Guadalupe Street. Students were walking toward campus. Coffee shops were crowded. The world had kept moving. What now? Cora asked, putting her sunglasses on. Now I go back to the office, I said, feeling the tight knot in my chest finally begin to loosen. It wasn't over. Chapter 11 restructuring would take months. I would have to sit in rooms with creditors. I would have to rebuild the cap table. I would have to talk to Declan and decide if I could ever trust him to write a line of code for me again. But the servers were secure. The patent was mine. The company, battered and bleeding, was entirely under my control. I left Cora at her hotel and took a rideshare back to the WeWork. The lobby was quiet. I walked past the front desk, went up to the 4th floor, and unlocked the glass door to my office. The morning light was pouring through the windows, illuminating the dust motes hanging in the air over my desk. I sat down in my chair. I opened my laptop. The screen flared to life, asking for my biometric scan. I pressed my thumb against the sensor. The lock clicked. The offline vault decrypted. The terminal opened. A clean blank screen waiting for input. I placed my hands on the keys, took a slow deep breath of the cool, conditioned air, and went to work.